Hi, this is Dan Cortopassi of TSG Multimedia, and today I'm reviewing some HO scale Sergent couplers. This is the Type E coupler, and I bought them in a starter set which includes parts to build 6 couplers for $7. Sergent also offers them in a pack of a gross for $84. These are what they call compatible Shank couplers, which fit in most ordinary HO scale coupler boxes. They also offer some different Shank styles for other types of coupler boxes. And Sergent also offers different styles of couplers like shelf couplers. So each coupler comes in several parts. There's this big part, and then the knuckle, and this other piece which holds the knuckle in. And there's this little ball, which is very important, and a spring. So I'm going to go ahead and put one together so you can see how it's done. The instructions say to burnish out this hole with a toothpick. So I just stick it in there and kind of twirl it around. And it also says to remove any flash from the inside, so I just use a small file. The instructions also say to remove flash from the knuckle. This is really hard to see, I know, because it's so small, but that's what I'm doing here. I'm also going to run the file over this other piece of the coupler on the inside. I'm scraping off the blackening, but this won't be seen when it's assembled. Sergent does sell an assembly jig which might help with some of this stuff. I didn't buy that. The hardest part I've found is getting this little ball inside here. There's a little hole that it sits in, and you kind of got it there. So I've managed to get the little ball to seat into the little hole inside the coupler. These little balls are really tiny, and they bounce really well. So be really careful when you're putting these things together. I would highly recommend working over a box or some other kind of container so that you at least have a chance of recovering it if you drop it. There's a little tiny prong right here, and the knuckle fits onto that. There's a little hole in the knuckle. So it's a little bit tricky to position this. I know my hand's getting in the way of the shot, but something like that. So this last part is going to be probably impossible for me to show without my fingers getting in the way of the picture. But this little piece has another little prong on it that fits into the other end of the knuckle and holds it. So it basically fits on top of here, and you want to put a little drop of glue somewhere back here to hold it, but make sure not to get any glue inside where the moving parts are. The instructions also say to put a little drop of glue right about here on the top. And I usually wipe it off so that there's no excess. The instructions recommend holding these upside down so that the knuckles don't lock, and to do this a few times to kind of wear them in a little bit. I've decided to try these out in an Atlas boxcar. The coupler box design on this is a little different, but let's take the original coupler out, and now I'm going to place the Sergent coupler. In this case, the coupler needs to be right side up because this is actually the top of the box right here. Now the spring that's included is not a centering spring. It's just there for some tension. And I've noticed that these are a little stiffer than the springs you're probably used to with Katie's. And these springs have a tendency to fly across the room really easily. So be careful when installing them. This is what it should look like after the spring is properly seated. So I put the lid back on the box, and I'm now putting it back on the boxcar. And I can just put the truck back on. Sergent sells this coupler height gauge for $5. And the way it works is you want to make sure that the knuckle on the coupler will fit into the slot on the coupler height gauge. And if it doesn't, then you need to adjust the car accordingly. So Sergent also has this uncoupling tool that they sell for $6, and it's magnetic, and it has one end with a little prong on it, and the other end is just plain. And so these couplers work a lot like prototype couplers in that you have to make sure that the knuckles are open before you couple. So you can use the end with the prong on it to do that. The magnet lifts that little metal ball that's inside and should allow the knuckle to come open. Yeah, there it goes. So just like prototype couplers, you have to make sure that they're centered side to side. And then let's see if we can couple up here. Didn't hit it hard enough, apparently. And test. Yeah, looks like we're hooked up. So now they should stay together. And then to uncouple, you use the blunt end and put it over one of the couplers, and it releases the knuckle. What's happening is that the little metal ball that we installed locks the knuckle in place when the knuckle closes. So it's essentially like the pin in a real coupler. So when you're using the little magnet, what you're doing is basically pulling the pin. One little problem that I've had, and I don't know if this is my fault for not doing something right, but sometimes I've noticed that they get stuck open and they won't couple. This one, actually, that one's a little bit stuck also. Yeah, this one's like locked open now. So I've had a little bit of trouble with that. I don't normally do this in reviews, but I know someone's going to ask, would I use them myself? And my answer is no, I won't. I find them a little bit too fussy, and I've just recently gone through all of my rolling stock and made sure it had KD 58s or 158s and that they're all at the right height. So I really don't fancy spending all the time and money it would take to convert hundreds of cars to use these things. But that's a very subjective and personal decision, so I don't think that that affects the review at all, but I just figured someone would probably want to know, so there's my answer. So overall, I think this is an interesting product. On the one hand, it offers an exact scale appearance and very close to prototypical behavior. On the other hand, they're not compatible with any of the other couplers on the market, so if you're going to go this way, it's pretty much an all or nothing proposition. Also, they need to be assembled. It's kind of difficult to evaluate. I know some people really like these things and swear by them. One thing I don't have any data on is how well they'll hold up in a long train going up a grade or something like that, which has caused problems with other types of couplers for me. So I can't really speak to that. They are extremely difficult, I think, to build, and with a lot of really tiny parts. And I'm someone who's used to tiny parts, and even I found them difficult to build. So I'm going to take a spike off for that, just for the difficulty factor. So my final verdict is 9 out of 10 spikes. If you or your company make a product that you'd like us to review, please drop us a line at reviews@tsgmultimedia.com.